Hey, welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here and submit your question for a future episode. Got a good question this week? Let's talk about it. Hello, Spencer. I'm the worship director at my church and have been concerned about my relationship building as a leader. I want to be a more involved leader. I believe the team's relationships overall are positive and we don't fight or argue. Praise God for unity. But I feel that as a leader, I could be more intentional. I desire to be more involved in the lives of my team and to build relationship. What tips do you have in building rapport with your team? Well, I'm glad that you're thinking about that because I think that that is an important part of being a leader of a worship team. We never want to just treat our team like they're a band, like they're a group of musicians that are almost like our backing band or something, and we're in charge of everything, and they're just there to support us or something like that, or they're just there to play guitar or bass or drums on Sunday. So yes, I think it's important that you build relationships with your worship team, especially. You said that you're the leader of the worship team. I don't know if you're full-time, part-time, volunteer, whatever it is. I think that there's probably different expectations depending on whether you're volunteer, part-time, full-time, whatever. You have a different amount of time to allot to this. But especially if you're full-time and you've been hired as a worship pastor or something like that, then it's in your responsibility to pastor the team. And that might even be in your job description, that you are shepherding your team of musicians. And so I just want you to be aware, this isn't just for you, Joseph, but for everybody who's leading a worship team, depending on your role as leader of the worship team, there is an element of shepherding that goes along with that. You have been placed in charge of this group of believers in your church, the specific group, and it's your job to shepherd and pastor them. And if you're going to do that, then you need to have a relationship with them. So how do you build a relationship with them? And I think seems like you're more speaking like one-on-one with people, because I think there is something to be said for a group-wide relationship and one-on-one, like I'm pastoring these specific people. And so let me give you a couple ideas for those. First of all, I think this really starts with how you run your worship rehearsals. I know some worship rehearsals are sort of just like, let's show up, let's run through our songs, okay, we're good, you know your bass parts, you know your keyboard parts, you know how to sing the harmonies, we're good, let's do a quick prayer and we'll go home. If that's how your worship rehearsals are, then chances are you probably aren't going to build very good relationships with the people on your team, and they will just be musicians to you. Why? Because what we focus on when we gather together on a regular basis, which our worship rehearsals are our regular gathering, what you focus on during those times will be what your relationship ends up being about. So if you only ever focus on music in your worship rehearsals, then guess what? People are only going to see you as a band leader, and they won't see you as anything else, and they won't want a relationship. Well, they might want a relationship with you outside of just being the band leader, but the worship rehearsal is the thing that will reinforce most what your worship ministry is about, because it's what you're going to do on a consistent basis. So you need a plan for your worship rehearsal, and that's why I put together the worship rehearsal blueprint. I'll link it down in the description below. It's a free PDF where I walk you through the 5 pieces of what I think is the perfect worship rehearsal that leads your team well, not just musically, but also spiritually, so that they grow closer to God, and relationally, which is what you want, so that they grow closer to each other. And that blueprint lays out a step-by-step process for focusing on all of those areas, not just musicianship. So for more information, check that out down in the description below. But just briefly, when it comes to worship rehearsals, don't just run through your songs, but use that as a time, your regular time. Think of it almost like a small group meeting together regularly. Use that time to build relationships with your team. And the way that I like to do that is just, first of all, we have like a check-in time at the beginning of our worship rehearsals. We ask how people's week's going, what's going on in their lives. And then we move into a devotional time where we work through one of the devotionals that I've written, or we just ask a poignant question. Like last night, we just had worship rehearsal and I asked, what can we celebrate right now? What are we doing well? And what can we do better? So we used that time, our devotional time, so to speak, to have a discussion about that. And just through talking those things out together, or through going through a devotional or something like that, you build relationships with your team because you make your worship rehearsals not just about music, but you actually build in a relational time to your worship rehearsal. And I know it's hard to come up with a devotional every week, so I'll link my worship team devotionals down in the description below if you need help with that. But bottom line is focus on how you structure your worship rehearsals. Don't just make them about music, make them about relationship and developing spiritually as well. And I say that because I think, just kind of reading between the lines in your question, it seemed like, and this is true for a lot of worship leaders, we want things outside of our normal routine to build relationships with our team. And I don't think that those things are bad. I'm just trying to point out that you've already committed, most likely, to having a regular time of getting together with your team, which is your worship rehearsal. And so instead of pouring ourselves, not that we shouldn't be doing this, but instead of trying to come up with like all of these extra things to add on, which once again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do. I'm just saying those are like this much of it, but then you have your worship rehearsal over here, which is the 80%, and all of this extra stuff is the 20% of building relationships with your team. There's something you've already committed to doing every week, so focus on how can I use that to build relationships with my worship team first, and then we can add these secondary things on that will strengthen our relationships with our worship team even more. So what are some gatherings, get-togethers outside of your normal worship rehearsal, which is where you should be primarily focusing if you want to build relationships with your worship team? And the first thing that comes to mind would be like a workshop or something where you get together with your team on a Saturday morning outside of your normal rehearsal time, and you say, hey, we're going to get together from 9 to 11:30 or something, and we're going to have breakfast together at 9, and then we're going to work through some workshop sessions together. And that gives your team some extended time where you can not only build relationships with them, but you can actually focus on something specific that you want to focus on with your team to help them improve in their musicianship or their understanding of the theology of worship or something along those lines. And if you want help with that, I'll link one of my worship team workshops down in the description below that will take your team through a biblical understanding of what corporate worship is. So workshops are good. Number two, I just think like a good old-fashioned get together to eat is probably one of the most relationship building things that you can do. You know, if you look at the early church in Acts, what did they do? They were basically eating together. I mean, they weren't just eating together, but that was one of the things that they were doing. They were breaking bread together, which could be communion, but I think it was also just sharing a meal together. If you want to build relationships, just share a meal with your worship team. Go out to a restaurant together or cook them a meal. I just did that for my worship team a few weeks ago. And that's not something that I do on a regular basis, but just getting together for, I think we met at 6 o'clock or something, and we ate some chicken tacos that I made. Super simple, just throw some chicken in the oven with taco seasoning, come up with some toppings, get some tortillas out, grab some chips and some salsa, and you're good to go for a meal. And we just got together, and I told them at the beginning of our meal, we prayed, and then I was like, just so you know, I don't have any agenda for tonight. We aren't like trying to accomplish anything specifically. We're just getting together to have a meal. And that's how you build relationships with people. Think how you build relationships with anybody, not just in your worship ministry. If you want to build a relationship with anybody, you just spend time with them. It's really that simple. It doesn't really matter what you do. It's just the act of spending time together with people that builds relationships. And now, obviously, I'm not just talking about sitting in a room, doing our own thing, but whatever event it is, just spend time with them and you will build relationships with them. And I know that that was true at the dinner that I just had with my worship team because we ate tacos and then we played a card game together and then we went home. And then when we came to church on Sunday morning, I could just tell that our team had grown closer together. So something as simple as eating together builds relationships. And so far we've only talked about like community building and not individual one-on-one, but I think that community building, so to speak, is important between all the members in your worship team. We don't want to just focus on building relationships one-on-one with our worship team members because then everybody's connected to you, but they're not connected to each other. And we should all be connected to each other, not just one-on-one with you and and somebody on your team, and the bass player comes to you and the drummer comes to you. No, we want the bass player and the drummer to go to each other when they have issues in their spiritual life as well. But that being said, that doesn't mean that we should never meet one-on-one with people. So how do you build relationships with people one-on-one? Once again, I think we overthink this. What do? You just spend time with them. So invite them out for coffee. Invite them and their wife out for dinner. Have them and their husband over to your house for dinner. Don't overthink it. Don't think you need to throw some big award ceremony at the end of the year. And as long as you do that one time at the end of the year, it's going to make the relationships of your team better. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying don't just be like, I can only do big events. True relationships are built in the small acts of just getting together for normal things. So don't overthink it. And like I said, far and above all of those big one-off events or whatever they are, or even small one-off events, the most important thing you can do is focus on your worship rehearsal time, because that is when you've decided to get together on a regular basis, and relationships are built on a regular getting together. So just focus on that time first. Beef that time up. If you need help with coming up with a plan for your worship rehearsals that leads your team well musically so that they're prepared for Sunday, but also spiritually so that they grow closer to God, and relationally so that they grow closer to each other, check out the worship rehearsal blueprint. I'll link that down in the description below. Other than that, till I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.